Beyond the material universe lies a realm of pure psychic energy, the immaterium, commonly known as the warp. Unlike the physical laws that govern real space, the warp defies conventional understanding, existing as a fluid dimension where time and space hold no meaning. It is a mirror to mortal consciousness, a roiling sea of psychic energy that reflects the collective emotions and thoughts of all sentient beings. The warp was not always the tumultuous nightmare realm it is in the 41st millennium. Ancient records and fragmentary evidence gathered by inquisitorial scholars suggest that the immaterium once existed as a calm and orderly dimension, a placid ocean of potential rather than the storm-racked hellscape it later became. This primordial warp served as a medium through which psychers could safely channel their abilities, and vessels could navigate between distant stars without fear of the horrors that now lurk between realities. The corruption of the warp began during the War in Heaven, the ancient conflict between the Necronter and the Old Ones that took place millions of years before humanity's first steps into space. The Old Ones, masters of the webway and warp manipulation, created psychically attuned warrior races to combat the Necronter and their Khatan allies. These new species, including the ancestors of the Eldari and the Krork, poured their emotions, suffering, and psychic might into the immaterium during the conflict. Contrary to common misconception, the War in Heaven did not create the warp, but rather corrupted it. The unprecedented psychic trauma inflicted upon reality during this ancient conflict tore at the fabric of the immaterium, transforming it from a calm dimension into the chaotic maelstrom known today. The deaths of billions and the unleashed psychic energies created ripples that would eventually coalesce into the first true warp entities, the nascent forms of what would later become the Chaos Gods. The relationship between real space and the warp exists in delicate balance. The two dimensions press against one another like adjacent membranes, separated by what the Adeptus Mechanicus terms the Empyrean Veil. This barrier prevents the unfiltered energies of the warp from spilling into reality, while also containing the raw emotions and psychic emanations of mortal beings within the immaterium. In certain locations, this barrier grows thin, creating areas where the laws of physics break down and the impossible becomes mundane. Warp storms represent violent disturbances in the immaterium that manifest in real space as swirling vortices of chaotic energy. These tempests can range from localized phenomena affecting single planets to vast galactic events like the Maelstrom or the Eye of Terror. Within these storms, time flows inconsistently. Fleets might emerge centuries after they entered, or even arrive before they departed. The unpredictable nature of warp storms has shaped imperial history, isolating worlds and fracturing empires throughout the millennia. The greatest warp storm in recorded history manifested in the aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade and the fall of Cadia. When the ancient pylons of Cadia failed, the built-up energies of 10,000 years erupted across the galaxy, creating the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift. This immense warp storm stretches from the Segmentum Obscurus to the eastern fringe, splitting the Imperium in two. On one side lies the Imperium Sanctus, bathed in the light of the Astronomicon. On the other, the Imperium Nihilus, cut off from Terra's guidance and left to fend for itself in what many call the Dark Imperium. The Cicatrix Maledictum represents more than just a navigational hazard. It is a physical manifestation of the Imperium's fracturing. Worlds caught within its grasp suffer reality-bending horrors as the laws of physics collapse. Time dilates, gravity fluctuates, and the barrier between dimensions wears thin enough for demons to manifest without summoning. Even on worlds at the edges of the Great Rift, madness and mutation run rampant as exposure to the warp corrupts both mind and body. Warp entities themselves represent the most fascinating aspect of the immaterium. These beings are not born of conventional biology, but form as psychic manifestations given shape through mortal consciousness. The most primitive warp entities emerge from simple emotional states, hatred, fear, desire, coalescing into minor demons and psychic predators that hunt in the shallows of the immaterium. These lesser entities lack true sentience, existing as emotional echoes that mimic consciousness without achieving it. More complex warp entities form through the collective psychic weight of specific beliefs or emotions. The Chaos Gods themselves represent the ultimate expression of this process, Khorne embodying rage and bloodshed, Nurgle personifying despair and resilience, Tzeentch manifesting ambition and change, and Slaanesh born from excess and sensation. These godlike entities possess awareness and agency beyond mortal comprehension, yet remain fundamentally tied to the emotions that birthed them. The Eldari pantheon provides another example of warp entities shaped by mortal consciousness. Gods like Asuryan, Isha, and Kine formed through the collective psychic might of the ancient Eldari civilization, taking on aspects and personalities that reflected Eldari cultural values. Unlike the Chaos gods, these deities maintained a beneficial relationship with their creators until the fall, when most were consumed by Slaanesh during its violent birth. The Emperor himself interacts with the warp in ways not entirely dissimilar to these ancient gods. The collective faith of trillions of human worshippers has created a psychic reflection of the Emperor in the Immaterium, the so-called God Emperor that exists alongside the physical master of mankind, interred upon the Golden Throne. Whether this warp entity represents a true extension of the Emperor's consciousness, or merely an echo created by human belief, remains fiercely debated among those few scholars aware of its existence. The nature of demons as psychic constructs explains their vulnerability to faith and willpower. When a demon manifests in real space, it struggles against the fundamental laws of a universe that rejects its existence. The focused belief of a Space Marine chaplain or an Imperial saint creates a competing reality that can banish a demon back to the warp. Similarly, symbols and rituals gain power against demons not through inherent properties, but through the conviction invested in them by their wielders. The Gellar Field, the essential technology that allows Imperial ships to traverse the warp, functions by projecting a bubble of real space around a vessel. This artificial extension of material reality keeps the ship and its occupants safe from direct exposure to the Immaterium during transit. The technology dates back to the Dark Age of technology and remains imperfectly understood by the Adeptus Mechanicus. When a Gellar Field fails during warp transit, the results are invariably catastrophic as warp entities flood into the unprotected vessel. Navigators, the three-eyed mutants who guide Imperial ships through the warp, perceive the Immaterium differently than normal humans. Their third eye allows them to see the psychic currents of the warp, and more importantly, detect the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon projected from Terra. This lighthouse in the warp, powered by the sacrifice of thousands of psychers and focused through the Emperor's will, provides the reference point by which navigators plot courses through the otherwise featureless Immaterium. The concept of warp travel itself illustrates the strange relationship between real space and the Immaterium. A journey that might take centuries at sublight speeds can be accomplished in weeks or months through the warp, as vessels slip sideways into a dimension where physical distance holds no meaning. However, this efficiency comes with inherent risk. Warp routes are unpredictable, with travel times varying based on warp conditions. A journey that takes days during calm warp conditions might require months during turbulent periods or prove impossible during full-fledged warp storms. Psychers represent living conduits between real space and the warp, individuals whose minds can channel the energies of the Immaterium into physical effects. The dangers they face extend beyond mere demon possession. The raw energies of the warp can overwhelm an untrained psyker, resulting in catastrophic psychic phenomena that devastate the surrounding area. The black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica constantly patrol Imperial worlds, gathering emergent psychers for training or sacrifice to power the Astronomicon and the Golden Throne. The birth of the Chaos Gods mirrors the evolution of sentient life itself, a gradual awakening of consciousness from the primordial soup of emotions that saturate the warp. While demons and lesser entities had existed within the Immaterium since the War in Heaven, the true Chaos Gods emerged much later, coalescing from specific emotional resonances that grew powerful enough to achieve self-awareness. Khorne, the Blood God, was the first to fully manifest in the early First Millennium. His birth coincided with humanity's first large-scale conflicts, though his essence had been gathering strength since the earliest tribal warfare. The concentrated bloodshed of ancient Terra's unification wars provided the final catalyst for Khorne's awakening. As armies clashed across continents and millions died in brutal combat, the psychic echoes of rage, honor, and martial pride coalesced into a singular entity. Khorne emerged fully formed as the embodiment of bloodshed, strength, and unbridled fury, a god of war in its purest form. The blood god's domain within the warp reflects his brutal nature. The brass citadel stands at the center of an endless plain of scorched earth and volcanic rock, where rivers of blood flow between mountains of skulls. Here, the souls of warriors battle eternally for Khorne's favor, their endless combat feeding the god's insatiable bloodlust. The citadel itself rises impossibly high, constructed from brass, bone, and blackened iron, surrounded by great foundries where demon smiths forge weapons for Khorne's legions. At its peak sits the blood god upon his skull throne, judging the worthy and condemning the weak. Nurgle, the Plague Father, emerged as the second Chaos god during the latter half of the first millennium. His birth coincided with devastating pandemics that swept across human populations, including the notorious plague of Justinian that decimated the ancient Terran Byzantine Empire. As countless millions succumbed to disease, their collective despair, resignation, and strange hope for deliverance from suffering gave form to the Lord of Decay. Nurgle embodies the natural cycle of rot and rebirth, finding perverse joy in the resilience of life even amidst the most horrific suffering. The Garden of Nurgle occupies a vast swampland within the warp, where rotting vegetation and bubbling pools of filth stretch to the horizon. Demon plants bloom with pus-filled flowers, while corpse-fed trees bear fruit of unnatural fecundity. At the center stands Nurgle's mansion, a rotting structure that somehow maintains its form despite advanced decay. Inside, the plague god tends to his cauldron, brewing new diseases with grandfatherly affection. The garden represents the paradox at Nurgle's core, decay and death existing alongside abundant life and renewal. Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways, crystallized into full consciousness during the middle to late first millennium, as human civilizations developed increasingly complex social structures and political systems. The psychic resonance of ambition, intrigue, hope, and the desire for change fed the nascent god until he achieved full awareness. The rise of religious and philosophical thought further strengthened Tzeentch, as mortals contemplated their place in the universe and sought to alter their fate through knowledge and sorcery. The impossible fortress serves as Tzeentch's domain, a constantly shifting labyrinth that defies physical laws and architectural sanity. Crystal towers rise and collapse, staircases lead to nowhere or everywhere simultaneously, and corridors twist back upon themselves in geometrically impossible configurations. At the heart of this maze lies the hidden library, where all knowledge, spells, and secrets are said to be stored. The Changer of Ways himself appears as a mass of shifting forms, never maintaining one appearance for long, a physical manifestation of his capricious nature and mastery over mutation. The great game between the first three Chaos gods began immediately upon their formation. Khorne's direct aggression clashed with Tzeentch's scheming and Nurgle's implacable advance, creating a three-way struggle for dominance that has continued for millennia. Their conflicts take place both within the Immaterium, where demon armies clash in impossible battles, and in real space, where mortal followers serve as proxies for their patrons' agendas. This balance of power remained relatively stable for thousands of years, with no god gaining permanent advantage over the others. The birth of Slaanesh, the youngest Chaos god, differed dramatically from the gradual emergence of the other ruinous powers. While Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch formed slowly from the collective emotions of numerous species over thousands of years, Slaanesh burst into existence in a single cataclysmic moment in the 30th millennium, an event known as the Fall of the Eldari. The ancient Eldari civilization had dominated the galaxy for millions of years following the war in heaven. Their mastery of technology and psychic arts allowed them to create a vast interstellar empire free from want or hardship. Without external threats to maintain focus, Eldari society gradually turned inward, seeking increasingly extreme forms of stimulation and pleasure to fill the emptiness of their immortal lives. This cultural decadence accelerated over thousands of years, with hedonistic cults gaining prominence throughout Eldari society. These pleasure cults practiced increasingly depraved acts in their pursuit of new sensations, engaging in sadistic rituals, excessive indulgence, and psychically enhanced experiences that blurred the line between pleasure and pain. The psychic resonance of these activities began to coalesce in the warp, forming a nascent entity that fed on the Eldari's excesses. The core worlds of the Eldari Empire transformed into centers of depravity, where all moral and ethical constraints were abandoned in pursuit of sensation. Only the Exodites, who had abandoned their homeworlds for simpler lives on frontier planets, and the craftworld Eldari, who fled in massive world ships, escaped the cultural corruption. The majority of the species continued their downward spiral, oblivious to the catastrophe their actions were creating in the immaterium. In the early 30th millennium, the accumulated psychic weight of Eldari depravity reached critical mass. The entity forming in the warp achieved consciousness in a violent psychic implosion centered on the heart of the Eldari Empire. In a single moment, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Excess, was born. The psychic shockwave of this birth tore through the warp, creating a massive tear in reality that would become known as the Eye of Terror. The birth scream of Slaanesh killed nearly the entire Eldari race instantly. Trillions of souls were consumed by the new god at the moment of its creation, their death cries feeding its hunger. The core worlds of the Empire were swallowed by the expanding Eye of Terror, dragged physically into the warp where they became demon worlds under Slaanesh's control. Only those Eldari who had fled on craft worlds or settled on distant Exodite worlds survived the catastrophe. Slaanesh's realm within the warp reflects the Dark Prince's nature as the god of excess. The Palace of Pleasure exists as a series of 6 concentric circles, each dedicated to a different aspect of sensation and desire. From the outermost circle, where relatively innocent indulgences like wealth and vanity hold sway, to the innermost sanctum where unimaginable depravities unfold, the realm becomes progressively more corrupting. At its center, Slaanesh reclines on a divan surrounded by mirrors that reflect the observer's deepest desires, a sight that drives most mortals mad with longing. The birth of Slaanesh dramatically altered the balance of power in the Great Game. The newcomer immediately challenged the established Chaos gods, bringing fresh energy and ambition to the eternal conflict. Khorne, in particular, developed an intense hatred for Slaanesh, as the Blood God's straightforward brutality contrasted sharply with the Dark Prince's subtle seductions. Nurgle viewed Slaanesh with a grandfather's mixture of indulgence and disapproval, while Tzeentch alternately allied with and plotted against the youngest god according to his incomprehensible schemes. The Great Game intensified following Slaanesh's emergence, with all 4 Chaos gods vying for supremacy through endless conflicts in the warp. These battles defy mortal understanding, fought across dimensions with weapons formed from pure emotion and armies that represent concepts rather than physical beings. A victory might mean the temporary dominance of rage over despair, or ambition over excess, manifesting in real space as shifts in fortune for the gods' mortal followers. Despite their eternal conflict, the Chaos gods occasionally unite against common threats. During the Horus Heresy, all 4 ruinous powers temporarily set aside their differences to corrupt the Emperor's grand design. Similarly, when the Necrons activated the pylons on Cadia during Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, the Chaos gods combined their efforts to ensure the planet's destruction, preventing a potential stabilization of the warp that would have diminished their power. The domains of the Chaos gods within the warp exist in a state of constant flux, expanding and contracting based on their patron's current power. These realms should not be understood as physical locations, but rather as psychic reflections of each god's nature. The boundaries between domains shift constantly, creating contested regions where demon armies clash for territory. These border wars form a significant part of the Great Game, with each god seeking to expand their influence at the expense of their rivals. Beyond the major domains of the 4 Chaos gods lie the realms of lesser powers, demon princes and independent entities who have carved out their own territories within the Immaterium. These minor players often align themselves with one of the major powers for protection, serving as vassals in exchange for a measure of independence. Others maintain neutrality by playing the greater powers against each other, a dangerous game that requires constant vigilance and adaptation. The formation of the Great Rift in the aftermath of Cadia's fall has strengthened all 4 Chaos gods, as the thinning of the barrier between real space and the warp allows their influence to spread more easily. This newfound power has paradoxically intensified their conflicts, as each god seeks to claim the largest share of this windfall. The current state of the Great Game remains more volatile than ever, with rapid shifts in power that reflect in real space as surges of demonic activity associated with different chaos gods. For mortals caught in the crossfire of these cosmic conflicts, the distinction between the chaos gods often blurs. A planetary governor driven to tyrannical excess might begin serving Slaanesh through his indulgences, only to slide into Khorne's influence as his methods grow more brutal. A scholar seeking forbidden knowledge might start as a devotee of Tzeentch, then fall to Nurgle's embrace when plague destroys his physical form, but offers a path to continue his research through undeath. The ruinous powers care little for the names mortals give them, concerned only with the emotions and souls they can harvest. The transition of a demon from the immaterium to real space represents one of the most dangerous phenomena in the galaxy. Unlike physical beings who exist naturally within material reality, demons are fundamentally creatures of the warp, composed of psychic energy and emotion rather than matter. Their manifestation in the physical universe requires a breach in the natural order, a temporary weakening of the barrier between dimensions that allows warp entities to push through into a realm that inherently rejects their existence. The most common method of demonic manifestation occurs through ritual summoning. Cultists, sorcerers, and corrupted psykers employ complex ceremonies designed to thin the veil between realities at a specific location. These rituals typically involve symbolic components that resonate with the desired entity: blood sacrifices for Khorne's servants, displays of excess for Slaanesh's minions, infected materials for Nurgle's plagues, or complex geometric patterns for Tzeentch's changers. The psychic energy generated through these rituals creates a localized weakening in reality, effectively a controlled tier in spacetime through which a demon can manifest. The complexity of a summoning ritual corresponds directly to the power of the entity being called forth. A minor demon might require nothing more than a simple blood sacrifice performed by a single cultist, while a greater demon necessitates elaborate ceremonies conducted by multiple sorcerers over extended periods. The most powerful demons, such as the bloodthirsters of the Eighth Host or the keepers of secrets from Slaanesh's inner circle, demand rituals of such intricacy and power that they can only be performed at sites already weakened by previous warp activity or during periods of significant warp disturbance. Spontaneous manifestations occur without deliberate summoning in areas where the barrier between realities has already worn thin. Locations with histories of psychic trauma, mass death, or previous demonic incursions develop what the Ordo Malleus terms reality scars, weakened points in the dimensional fabric that make subsequent breaches more likely. Prolonged warp storms create similar conditions across entire regions of space, allowing demons to manifest with minimal external assistance. The worlds within the Cicatrix Maledictum now experience this phenomenon on an unprecedented scale, with demonic entities materializing without warning in areas particularly saturated with warp energy. Psykers represent another vector for demonic manifestation. An untrained or undisciplined psyker serves as a living conduit between dimensions, their mind forming a bridge that demons can traverse to enter real space. This process may begin subtly, with the demon whispering to the psyker's consciousness and encouraging actions that further weaken their mental defenses. Once these defenses collapse, the demon can pour through the psychic connection into physical reality. The black ships of the Imperium exist primarily to prevent such occurrences, gathering untrained psykers before they can become unwitting gateways for warp entities. When a demon materializes in real space, it must overcome the fundamental laws of a universe that rejects its existence. The process resembles a form of psychic crystallization, with the demon's essence condensing into a physical form that approximates its warp appearance. This materialization requires constant expenditure of energy, as the demon must actively resist the natural forces attempting to banish it back to the immaterium. The strain of this resistance explains why most demonic incursions remain temporary. Eventually, the entity exhausts its energy reserves and dissipates, its essence returning to the warp. The physical forms adopted by demons often incorporate symbolic elements associated with their patron god. Khorne's demons manifest in shades of red and brass, their bodies adorned with skulls and burning sigils. Nurgle's servants appear bloated and diseased, leaking contagious fluids from suppurating wounds. Tzeentch's demons shimmer with unnatural colors and constantly shifting features, while Slaanesh's minions blend beauty and horror in disturbing combinations of perfection and excess. These appearances reflect not biological necessity, but psychic resonance. The demon's form represents a physical manifestation of the emotional concepts it embodies. The limitations imposed on demons in real space extend beyond the constant energy drain of manifestation. Physical laws constrain their movement and capabilities, forcing entities accustomed to the fluid reality of the warp to operate within the rigid framework of material existence. Gravity binds them to planetary surfaces, atmospheric conditions affect their functionality, and physical barriers restrict their passage. A demon that could traverse vast psychic distances instantaneously in the warp finds itself limited to conventional movement in real space, albeit often at speeds that still exceed normal physical capabilities. Demonic presence in real space creates localized reality distortions as the warp blades through the weakened dimensional barrier. The specific nature of these distortions varies according to the demon's patron. Khorne's servants generate waves of rage that trigger violent behavior in nearby mortals, while Nurgle's demons accelerate decay in surrounding matter. Tzeentch's manifestations cause random mutations and probability shifts, and Slaanesh's minions heighten sensory experiences to painful extremes. These effects intensify with the demon's power and the duration of its presence, gradually reshaping the affected area to resemble the warp realm from which it emerged. The most stable demonic manifestations occur on demon worlds, planets fully subsumed by the warp where the barriers between dimensions have collapsed entirely. Within these corrupted spheres, demons exist indefinitely without the energy expenditure required elsewhere in real space. The laws of physics operate inconsistently on demon worlds, with gravity, time, and causality fluctuating according to the whims of the ruling entities. The majority of these worlds exist within warp rifts like the Eye of Terror or the Maelstrom, though the formation of the Cicatrix Maledictum has created new demon worlds throughout the galaxy as planets caught within the Great Rift succumb to warp corruption. True names represent a critical element in demonic summoning and binding. Every demon possesses a unique identifier, a psychic signature expressed as a name that encapsulates its essence. Knowledge of a demon's true name grants power over the entity, allowing a summoner to compel its manifestation and impose conditions on its behavior. These names exist as complex psychic constructs rather than simple verbal labels, often incorporating sounds impossible for human vocal apparatus to produce and concepts that defy translation into any mortal language. Sorcerers typically record approximations of these names using specialized notation systems developed specifically for demonic summoning. The Ordo Malleus maintains heavily warded vaults containing tomes of true names, each entry representing centuries of dangerous research. Inquisitors use these names to bind and interrogate demons, extracting information about warp phenomena and enemy movements. This practice carries extreme risk, as knowledge of a true name flows both ways. The demon becomes aware of any mortal who learns its name, creating a psychic connection that the entity can exploit. Many an overconfident summoner has fallen to possession after attempting to bind a demon whose true name they imperfectly understood. Binding rituals establish metaphysical constraints on manifested demons, forcing them to remain within specific boundaries and compelling obedience to the summoner's commands. These bindings typically incorporate physical components, salt circles, warded chains, consecrated vessels, empowered through ritual to contain warp energy. The strength of a binding depends on both the technical precision of the ritual and the willpower of the binder, as the demon constantly tests the constraints for weaknesses it can exploit. Even the most powerful bindings eventually degrade as the demon's presence erodes the material components, necessitating renewal of the ritual to maintain control. The Imperium employs binding technology in various specialized applications, most notably in the construction of demon engines. These horrific war machines incorporate bound demons within mechanical shells, creating weapons that combine technological efficiency with warp-spawned malice. The Ordo Malleus occasionally utilizes similar principles to create demon hosts, physical vessels prepared to contain specific entities for interrogation or transport. Such practices remain highly controversial even within the Inquisition, as the risk of containment failure increases proportionally with the power of the bound entity. Demonic possession represents perhaps the most insidious form of manifestation, as it allows a warp entity to enter real space by inhabiting an existing physical vessel rather than creating a new form. Human hosts provide the most common targets, though possession of other organisms, mechanical systems, and even inanimate objects occurs under specific circumstances. The possession process typically begins with psychic influence, dreams, whispered suggestions, or emotional manipulation that weakens the target's mental defenses. Once these defenses falter, the demon seizes control of the physical form, suppressing or destroying the original consciousness. The physiological changes accompanying possession vary with the demon's nature and power. Minor possessions might cause subtle alterations, unusual eye coloration, slightly elongated fingers, or behavioral changes that could be mistaken for mental illness. More powerful demons transform their hosts dramatically, warping flesh into demonic configurations and manifesting physical characteristics associated with their patron god. Complete possessions by greater demons result in total reconstruction of the host body, retaining little or nothing of the original form as the vessel expands and mutates to accommodate the entity's full power. Mechanical possession follows different principles than organic possession, as machines lack consciousness that must be overcome. Instead, demon code infiltrates electronic systems through corrupted data, scrap code, or direct warp interference. The Adeptus Mechanicus recognizes this threat through doctrines concerning machine spirits, the belief that all technology contains a quasi-conscious essence that must be protected from corruption. Proper maintenance rituals incorporate protective measures designed to prevent demonic infiltration, including sanctified oils, binary exorcism codes, and regular purging of potentially corrupted systems. Spatial possession, the corruption of physical space itself, represents the most comprehensive form of demonic manifestation. This phenomenon occurs when warp energy saturates an area so completely that reality itself becomes malleable, allowing demons to manipulate the physical environment directly. Structures twist into impossible configurations, distances expand or contract unpredictably, and the boundary between material and immaterial blurs beyond recognition. The process typically begins at locations with significant psychic resonance, sites of mass sacrifice, powerful rituals, or catastrophic warp breaches, and spreads outward as the corruption takes hold. The Geller field technology used in Imperial warp travel functions specifically to prevent spatial possession of vessels traversing the immaterium. By projecting a bubble of stable real space around the ship, the field prevents direct contact between the vessel and the raw warp. When Geller fields fail during transit, the results demonstrate the horrifying efficiency of spatial possession. Ships emerge from the warp transformed into nightmarish configurations of twisted metal and organic growth, their crews either dead or transformed into mutated abominations serving the entities that claim the vessel. Demonic banishment reverses the manifestation process, forcibly returning a warp entity to the immaterium. The simplest method involves destroying the demon's physical form, which disrupts its anchor in real space and allows natural dimensional forces to reclaim its essence. More sophisticated approaches employ ritual countermeasures, specialized exorcism rites, null fields generated by blanks or pariahs, or psychic techniques that sever the demon's connection to its power source. The Grey Knight Space Marine chapter specializes in such techniques, their warriors trained extensively in the metaphysical principles underlying demonic manifestation. The duration a demon can maintain presence in real space depends on several factors. The entity's inherent power provides the primary determinant. Greater demons can resist banishment significantly longer than lesser entities from the same patron. Environmental conditions also influence manifestation stability, with areas already saturated with warp energy supporting demonic presence more effectively than untainted regions. Ritual support from cultists or sorcerers can extend a demon's stay through regular sacrifices that provide energy to maintain the entity's physical form. Without such support, even powerful demons eventually succumb to the natural forces, pushing them back toward the immaterium. The demonic legions of Khorne embody the blood god's martial philosophy in their rigid hierarchy and single-minded devotion to slaughter. Unlike the mercurial hordes of Tzeentch or the disorganized rabble of Nurgle, Khorne's forces operate with military precision, arranged in 8 distinct ranks that mirror the sacred number of their master. This organizational structure, known as the Eightfold Path, ensures that every demon knows its place in the blood god's grand design, from the lowliest flesh hound to the mightiest bloodthirster. At the pinnacle of Khorne's hierarchy stand the bloodthirsters, greater demons of unparalleled martial prowess. Standing 3 to 4 times the height of a space marine, these winged monstrosities combine bestial fury with tactical brilliance. Their muscular bodies, reminiscent of ancient Terran minotaurs, ripple with barely contained rage. Brass armor adorns their crimson flesh, inscribed with kill markings and blood-soaked runes. Each bloodthirster wields a matched pair of hell-forged weapons, typically a massive axe capable of cleaving a battle tank in two, paired with a barbed whip that can snare victims and drag them within reach of the demon's fangs. Bloodthirsters themselves are divided into 8 distinct hosts, each with specialized combat roles. The first host, the most elite, serves as Khorne's personal guard within the Brass Citadel. The third host specializes in aerial combat, while the fifth host excels at siege warfare. Most commonly encountered in real space are bloodthirsters of the 8th host, who lead Khorne's armies into battle against worthy foes. The differences between hosts manifest in subtle variations of their physical forms, differing horn configurations, weapon preferences, and armor designs that experienced demon hunters can use to identify which strain of bloodthirster they face. Among the bloodthirsters, certain individuals have achieved legendary status even within the annals of demonkind. Angrath the Unbound, Lord of the Bloodthirsters, commands the first host and serves as Khorne's most trusted lieutenant. His manifestations in real space are rare but catastrophic. During the Siege of Vrax, Angrath single-handedly slaughtered over 100 Grey Knights before being banished. Skarbrand the Exiled One presents a unique case. Once Khorne's greatest champion, he attempted to strike his master in a moment of manipulated rage. For this transgression, Khorne cast him from the Brass Citadel, stripping away his personality and reason while leaving his anger intact. Now Skarbrand wanders both the warp and real space as Rage Incarnate, attacking anything in his path with mindless fury. Below the bloodthirsters in Khorne's hierarchy are the Heralds, demonic commanders who lead smaller warbands into battle. These entities often ride juggernauts, massive demonic beasts that resemble a fusion of rhinoceros and bull, their bodies encased in brass armor. Heralds carry the blood god's authority to lesser demons, ensuring discipline among ranks otherwise prone to uncontrolled bloodlust. Their physical forms vary widely, though all bear the marks of Khorne's favor: crimson skin, brass armor, and weapons that drip with the blood of previous victims. The backbone of Khorne's armies consists of bloodletters, humanoid demons that stand slightly taller than an average human. Their elongated heads feature a single horn protruding from the forehead, while their leathery skin ranges from deep crimson to blackened red. Each bloodletter wields a hellblade, a sword forged from solidified warp energy that burns with internal fire and cuts through both armor and spirit with equal ease. In battle, bloodletters move with unnatural speed, their fighting style combining brutal efficiency with predatory grace. They attack in coordinated packs, using numerical advantage to overwhelm stronger opponents through sheer aggression. Bloodcrushers represent the elite shock cavalry of Khorne's legions, combining the ferocity of bloodletters with the unstoppable momentum of juggernauts. These formations thunder across battlefields, crushing infantry beneath brass hooves and goring survivors with their mounts' massive horns. The bloodletter riders strike at exposed targets from their elevated position, their hellblades harvesting skulls with mechanical precision. The The psychological impact of a Bloodcrusher charge often proves as devastating as its physical effects. Even hardened veterans break and flee before these living battering rams. For aerial support, Khorne's legions deploy flesh hounds, demonic beasts that combine aspects of wolves and reptiles. These relentless trackers hunt with supernatural senses that can detect prey across vast distances, following the scent of blood or fear through the warp itself. Brass collars encircle their necks, crafted by Khorne himself to protect his hunters from enemy sorcery. This protection, combined with their natural resistance to psychic powers, makes flesh hounds the bane of enemy psychers, who find their abilities nullified when these predators close in for the kill. The skull cannons serve as Khorne's artillery, bizarre war machines that blur the line between demon and weapon. These brass constructs roll across battlefields on grinding gears, collecting skulls from the fallen and loading them into their hellish mechanisms. The cannons fire these skulls as projectiles, each one wreathed in warp fire and screaming with the rage of its former owner. Where these macabre missiles strike, reality itself ruptures, allowing lesser demons to spill through into real space. Blood thrones function similarly, but serve as mobile command platforms for heralds, allowing Khorne's lieutenants to direct the battlefield while contributing to the slaughter. At the lowest tier of Khorne's hierarchy scuttle the bloodspawn, formless masses of muscle, teeth, and claws that manifest in the wake of particularly bloody conflicts. These entities lack the defined purpose of other Khornate demons, existing simply to kill and maim until banished back to the warp. Their physical forms vary wildly, with no two bloodspawn appearing identical. Some resemble inside-out beasts with organs exposed, while others manifest as tangles of limbs surrounding gnashing maws. Their unpredictable nature makes them dangerous even to other demons, as bloodspawn attack anything within reach, regardless of allegiance. The eightfold path that structures Khorne's legions reflects the blood god's martial philosophy, a belief system centered on personal strength, honor in combat, and the glory of bloodshed. Unlike the complex schemes of Tzeentch or the sensual excesses of Slaanesh, Khorne's ethos remains straightforward. Strength proves worth, weakness deserves death, and valor in battle brings eternal reward. This philosophy attracts warriors from across the galaxy, from tribal fighters on feral worlds to disillusioned space marines seeking purpose in slaughter. Central to Khorne's philosophy is his hatred of sorcery and psychic powers. The blood god views such abilities as the weapons of cowards who lack the courage to face enemies directly. This disdain manifests physically in Khorne's demons, who possess natural resistance to psychic attacks and often bear anti-warp properties in their weapons and armor. The brass collars worn by flesh hounds represent the most direct expression of this philosophy, devices specifically designed to neutralize enemy psychers and force them into physical combat where Khorne's servants excel. The blood god's antipathy toward psychers extends to his human followers, who reject warpcraft in favor of direct action. Khornate cults emphasize martial training, weapons mastery, and physical conditioning rather than the arcane rituals favored by worshippers of other chaos gods. Even Khorne's Chaos Space Marines, primarily drawn from assault-oriented legions like the World Eaters, eschew librarians and sorcerers, relying instead on overwhelming force and combat skill. This limitation, while restrictive, ensures that Khorne's followers remain focused on his core values rather than diluting their purpose through magical shortcuts. Despite his rejection of sorcery, Khorne recognizes the value of blood sacrifice in thinning the veil between dimensions. Khornate rituals focus on the act of killing rather than complex incantations, with the spilled blood itself serving as the medium through which demons manifest. The quantity and quality of blood offered determines the power of the entity summoned. A single murder might call forth a minor demon, while mass slaughter on a battlefield can open rifts large enough for bloodthirsters to step through. This direct connection between violence and manifestation reinforces Khorne's position as the most straightforward of the Chaos gods, his favor earned through deeds rather than words. Throughout Imperial history, Khornate demonic incursions have left trails of devastation across countless worlds. The First War for Armageddon in the 444th year of the 41st millennium represents perhaps the most infamous example, when the demon Primarch Angron led a host of World Eaters, and Khornate demons against the heavily populated Hive world. For 8 weeks, bloodthirsters soared between Hive spires, while bloodletter hordes clashed with Imperial defenders in the Ash Wastes. The intervention of the Grey Knights ultimately banished Angron and his demonic allies, but only after millions had died and entire Hive cities lay in ruins. The Siege of Vrax provides another example of Khorne's influence, as the protracted conflict devolved from an Imperial suppression action into a full-scale demonic incursion. As the death toll mounted over years of brutal trench warfare, Khornate demons found increasingly easy passage to the material realm. By the siege's final years, bloodthirsters led armies of lesser demons alongside traitor forces, with Angrath the Unbound himself manifesting to challenge the Grey Knights. The contamination proved so severe that the Ordo Malleus eventually ordered exterminatus on sections of the planet, preferring destruction to continued demonic infestation. More recently, the formation of the Cicatrix Maledictum has facilitated unprecedented levels of Khornate activity across the Imperium. On Vigilus, a key strategic world guarding a stable warp route through the Great Rift, Khornate demons manifested in the wake of cultist uprisings. Bloodletter packs prowled the Underhives, while flesh hounds hunted down loyalist psychers. Similar manifestations have occurred throughout the Imperium Nihilus, where weakened barriers between dimensions allow Khorne's servants easier access to real space. The Blood God's legions demonstrate particular tactical patterns that experienced Imperial commanders learned to recognize. Unlike the disease-spreading forces of Nurgle or the corruption-focused servants of Slaanesh, Khornate demons prioritize direct combat against the strongest enemy forces. They specifically target enemy leadership, champions, and elite units, seeking worthy skulls for Khorne's throne. This preference for challenging opponents sometimes creates exploitable weaknesses, as Khornate forces may ignore strategic objectives in favor of worthy combat. However, it also means that Imperial commanders cannot protect themselves by hiding behind expendable troops. Khorne's hunters will find paths to their chosen prey regardless of defensive preparations. When manifesting in real space, Khorne's demons bring with them environmental effects that reflect their master's nature. The temperature rises sharply in their vicinity, metal surfaces heat to burning temperatures, and water evaporates into steam. Exposed blood boils and spatters, while wounds bleed more profusely than normal. Those in proximity to stronger Khornate entities experience psychological effects as well: increased aggression, diminished impulse control, and overwhelming bloodlust that can turn disciplined soldiers into frenzied berserkers. These effects intensify with the power of the demon present, reaching their peak in the presence of greater demons like bloodthirsters. The physical composition of Khornate demons reflects their function as living weapons. Their bodies, formed from solidified warp energy, prioritize combat effectiveness over all other considerations. Bloodletters possess unnaturally dense musculature that allows them to match space marines in strength despite their relatively slim builds. Their skin hardens on contact with material weapons, while their own hellblades never dull or break regardless of use. Bloodthirsters demonstrate similar adaptations scaled to their massive size, with wings capable of supporting their enormous weight and regenerative capabilities that can repair even catastrophic damage given sufficient time and blood. The Blood God's hatred of sorcery manifests in his demons' natural resistance to psychic powers. Lesser Khornate entities can shrug off minor psychic attacks through sheer rage, while greater demons generate nullifying auras that disrupt nearby warp manipulations. This resistance extends to their weapons and equipment. Hellblades can cut through psychic shields, brass armor deflects warp-based attacks, and the collars worn by flesh hounds actively seek out and neutralize psychic energy. These adaptations make Khorne's legions particularly effective against forces that rely heavily on psychic support, including Eldar, Thousand Sons, and Grey Knights. The demonic legions of Tzeentch present a stark contrast to the regimented ranks of Khorne's forces. Where the Blood God's armies operate with brutal directness, the servants of the Changer of Ways embody complexity and transformation in both form and function. Tzeentch's demonic hierarchy defies conventional understanding, constantly shifting in structure and purpose as schemes reach fruition and new plots begin. This perpetual state of evolution reflects the fundamental nature of their patron, a god whose domain encompasses change, ambition, and the manipulation of fate itself. At the apex of Tzeentch's forces stand the Lords of Change, greater demons, whose intellects rival or exceed those of the most brilliant mortal minds. These towering entities combine avian and reptilian features in their physical forms, with feathered bodies supporting serpentine necks and bird-like heads. Their limbs often transform mid-gesture, fingers elongating into talons or dissolving into tentacles as needed. Most Lords of Change stand 3 to 4 times the height of a human, their bodies wreathed in shimmering auras of multi-colored energy that distort reality in their vicinity. Unlike Khorne's straightforward bloodthirsters, Lords of Change specialize in subtle manipulation rather than direct confrontation. Their mastery of sorcery allows them to reshape battlefields from afar, summoning warp storms, transmuting enemy soldiers into mindless spawn, or weaving illusions so convincing that entire armies can be led into ambushes. When forced into physical combat, these greater demons reveal surprising martial prowess, wielding enchanted staves that channel devastating spells or wielding their razor-sharp talons with surgical precision. Among the Lords of Change, Kairos Fateweaver holds unique status as Tzeentch's oracle. This singular entity possesses 2 heads, each capable of independent thought and speech. The left head perceives all possible futures, while the right sees every detail of the past, granting Kairos unparalleled strategic insight. This gift came at terrible cost. Tzeentch cast Kairos into the Well of Eternity, a nexus of pure possibility at the heart of his realm. When the demon emerged, his body was withered and his central head, the one perceiving the present, had been destroyed, leaving Kairos unable to fully comprehend the immediate moment despite his knowledge of past and future. Kairos serves as Tzeentch's foremost advisor, interpreting the tangled skein of fate for his master's benefit. His manifestations in real space are rare but catastrophic, as his presence distorts probability itself. During the 13th Black Crusade, Kairos appeared on the Fenris system's outer worlds, where his manipulations of fate ensured the destruction of the Space Wolves' geneseed repositories. On Xandrax Prime, his whispered prophecies drove an entire planetary government to mass suicide after revealing the inescapable doom awaiting their civilization. Imperial tacticians consider Kairos among the most dangerous entities in Tzeentch's arsenal, as his ability to perceive potential futures allows him to counter strategies before they're implemented. The Changeling represents another specialized agent in Tzeentch's hierarchy. This unique demon possesses the ability to assume the appearance of any being it encounters, mimicking not just physical form, but mannerisms, voice patterns, and even psychic signatures. The Changeling has infiltrated every major power in the galaxy at various points, impersonating Space Marine chapter masters, inquisitors, orc warbosses, and even other demons. Its true form, rarely glimpsed, appears as a vaguely humanoid figure of constantly shifting features, its skin flowing like liquid as it transitions between disguises. The Changeling's infiltrations have precipitated countless disasters throughout Imperial history. During the Third Armageddon War, it impersonated a senior Manufactorum overseer, subtly altering production specifications for artillery shells to ensure they exploded prematurely. On Nemesis Tessera, home of the Inquisitorial Fortress, it once spent 3 years posing as an Ordo Malleus interrogator, corrupting intelligence reports and arranging the accidental destruction of valuable demonic research. The Changeling takes particular delight in assuming the identities of high-ranking Khornate champions, using these disguises to issue contradictory orders that throw the Blood God's forces into disarray. Below these unique entities in Tzeentch's hierarchy stand the Heralds of Tzeentch, lesser demon princes who serve as field commanders and emissaries. These beings typically manifest as smaller versions of Lords of Change, though with greater variability in their physical forms. Some appear as multi-limbed scholars carrying scrolls of forbidden knowledge, while others take the form of floating orbs surrounded by geometric patterns of pure energy. All heralds possess significant psychic abilities, specializing in divination, biomancy, or pyromancy according to their particular role in Tzeentch's grand scheme. The most common foot soldiers in Tzeentch's legions are the Pink Horrors, demonic entities that embody their master's capricious nature. Standing roughly human-sized, these demons possess gangly limbs, cyclopean eyes, and constantly grinning mouths filled with needle-like teeth. Their skin shifts through various shades of pink and purple, occasionally forming patterns that resemble faces or arcane symbols before dissolving back into chaotic swirls. Pink horrors move with unsettling agility, capering across battlefields while cackling madly and hurling balls of multicolored warp fire at enemies. The defining characteristic of pink horrors lies not in their offensive capabilities, but in their unique response to injury. When a pink horror is slain, its essence splits into two smaller blue horrors, each possessing half the original demon's power but twice its malice. These blue entities continue fighting with diminished magical abilities but increased physical aggression. If a blue horror is destroyed, it further splits into a pair of tiny brimstone horrors, diminutive creatures of living flame that swarm enemies in overwhelming numbers. This splitting process reflects Tzeentch's philosophy that destruction merely creates opportunity for transformation rather than true ending. Flamers of Tzeentch serve as the Changer's primary ranged support, bizarre entities that combine aspects of squid and furnace in their physical forms. Their upper bodies feature multiple tentacle-like appendages ending in constantly opening and closing maws, while their lower portions consist of a rippling mass that propels them across the battlefield in bouncing movements. Flamers attack by projecting multicolored warp fire from their maw-tipped limbs, these flames possessing the unique property of burning both physical matter and mental constructs simultaneously. Victims who survive a flamer's attack often experience radical personality changes as the demon fire consumes portions of their psyche along with their flesh. For aerial superiority, Tzeentch's legions deploy screamers, ray-like entities that swim through the air as if it were water. These predatory demons hunt in packs, their streamlined bodies slicing through reality with razor-sharp ventral fins. Screamers attack by diving through their targets, their bodies temporarily phasing into a higher dimensional state that allows them to pass through physical matter while severing the bonds between atoms. Against vehicles and fortifications, screamers execute coordinated attack patterns, each pass weakening structural integrity until the target collapses into component particles. The psychic wake left by their movement creates discordant sounds that induce hallucinations in mortal witnesses, hence their name. The burning chariots represent Tzeentch's heavy assault units, consisting of elaborate constructs pulled by paired screamers and piloted by exalted flamers. These vehicles defy conventional physics, floating above the battlefield on cushions of shimmering energy, while components of their structure constantly rearrange themselves into new configurations. The chariots serve as mobile firing platforms, allowing their flamer pilots to rain warp fire across wide areas while remaining beyond the reach of enemy counterattacks. In particularly important engagements, heralds of Tzeentch might commandeer these chariots, adding their considerable psychic might to the vehicle's already formidable offensive capabilities. Disc-riding heralds form Tzeentch's equivalent to cavalry, mounting sentient platforms called discs of Tzeentch that resemble enlarged versions of screamers. These living vehicles bond psychically with their riders, anticipating commands and reacting to threats with near-instantaneous response times. The discs themselves possess offensive capabilities, their edges molecularly sharp and capable of slicing through ceramite armor with ease. The mobility afforded by these mounts allows Tzeentch's commanders to rapidly reposition across battlefields, appearing wherever their sorcerous abilities can most effectively turn the tide of conflict. The most mysterious of Tzeentch's servants are the Chaos Furies, entities created when mortal souls are claimed by the Warp, but not specifically claimed by any particular Chaos god. Those that drift into Tzeentch's domain undergo rapid mutation, their forms becoming asymmetrical amalgamations of various creatures. Wings sprout from unlikely places, extra limbs emerge and disappear randomly, and their flesh cycles through impossible colors. Furies serve primarily as scouts and harassers, their ability to navigate between reality and the Warp making them ideal for reconnaissance missions across dimensional boundaries. Tzeentch's demonic forces operate according to strategies of bewildering complexity, often pursuing objectives incomprehensible to outside observers. What appears as random movement or wasted effort frequently reveals itself as part of elaborate traps designed to unfold over extended timeframes. A seemingly failed assault might place key units in position for an attack scheduled decades later, while an apparent retreat could manipulate enemies into positions of vulnerability only recognizable from a higher dimensional perspective. This approach to warfare reflects Tzeentch's nature as the architect of fate, each move calculated to advance multiple schemes simultaneously. The psychic nature of Tzeentch's legions manifests most visibly in the sorcerous capabilities possessed by nearly all his servants. Even the lowliest horror can manipulate warp energies to some degree, while Lords of Change command psychic powers rivaling those of the most gifted mortal psychers. These abilities typically manifest as multicolored flames, geometric patterns of energy, or reality warping distortions that bend light and matter in impossible ways. The constant use of such powers in Tzeentch's presence creates what Imperial scholars term Empyrean bleed, areas where prolonged exposure to warp energies thins the barrier between dimensions, allowing even greater manifestations of demonic power. The corruption spread by Tzeentch's demons differs significantly from that of other Chaos gods. Where Nurgle's servants spread physical disease and Slaanesh's minions encourage moral degradation, Tzeentch's influence manifests primarily through intellectual and philosophical corruption. Exposure to his demons plants seeds of ambition, paranoia, and intellectual hubris that grow over time into full-fledged obsession. Victims find themselves pursuing knowledge regardless of consequence, their moral constraints eroding as they rationalize increasingly extreme actions in service to their goals. This subtle approach allows Tzeentch's corruption to penetrate institutions normally resistant to more obvious chaos influence, including the highest levels of imperial governance. The Silver Towers of Tzeentch represent the most dramatic manifestations of the Changer's power in real space. These massive structures materialize from the warp fully formed, their impossible architecture defying gravitational laws and Euclidean geometry. Exterior surfaces feature constantly shifting patterns of silver and blue energy, while the interiors contain labyrinthine passages that reconfigure themselves according to the tower's inscrutable purposes. Each silver tower serves as both fortress and laboratory, where Lords of Change conduct arcane experiments and develop new forms of sorcery. The mere presence of these structures corrupts surrounding reality, causing spontaneous mutations in local flora and fauna while weakening the barrier between dimensions. The largest recorded incursion of Silver Towers occurred during the Thousand Suns invasion of the Fenris system in the late 41st millennium. 9 towers materialized in orbit around the Space Wolves' homeworld, each under the command of a different Lord of Change. The psychic backlash from their arrival drove thousands of Fenrisian citizens insane, while the towers themselves disgorged legions of Tzeentchian demons onto the planet's surface. Though the Space Wolves eventually repelled the invasion with assistance from Dark Angels and Grey Knight's forces, the psychic contamination left behind necessitated the sterilization of several Fenrisian continents. The relationship between Tzeentch's demons and the Thousand Suns traitor legion exemplifies the Changer's approach to mortal pawns. Following their fall to chaos during the Horus Heresy, the Thousand Suns became vessels for Tzeentchian entities, their bodies transforming into living conduits for warp energy. The rubric of Ahriman, intended to halt this transformation, instead reduced most of the Legion to dust-filled automata animated by bound demon spirits. The surviving sorcerers maintain symbiotic relationships with Tzeentch's demons, exchanging knowledge and power, while each side attempts to manipulate the other for their own ends. This complex arrangement typifies the Changer's preference for convoluted, multi-layered relationships rather than straightforward domination. The manipulative nature of Tzeentch's servants extends to their interactions with other Chaos factions. Lords of Change frequently establish temporary alliances with Slaaneshi forces, exploiting the Dark Prince's hedonistic demons as unwitting distractions while pursuing their own objectives. Relations with Nurgle's followers remain universally hostile, reflecting the fundamental opposition between change and stagnation embodied by these rival gods. Khorne's direct, martial approach receives particular contempt from Tzeentch's servants, who view the blood god's straightforward violence as philosophically limited and strategically predictable. Within the fetid expanse of the Garden of Nurgle stretches a hierarchy as ancient and unyielding as disease itself. Unlike the rigid martial structure of Khorne's legions or the ever-shifting ranks of Tzeentch's followers, Nurgle's demonic forces operate as a grotesque family, bound together by shared affliction and the paradoxical joy found in suffering. This twisted ecosystem mirrors the natural order of decay and rebirth, with each demon fulfilling a specific role in the endless cycle of contagion that the plague god orchestrates across reality. The garden itself serves as both domain and incubator for Nurgle's creations. Spanning impossible distances within the warp, this blighted realm consists of rotting forests, fetid swamps, and plains of diseased flesh that pulse with unnatural vitality. Corpse-fed trees tower hundreds of feet high, their branches heavy with fruit that resembles swollen organs. Flowers bloom with the faces of the damned, their petals formed from flayed skin, while pools of bubbling filth serve as breeding grounds for new plagues. The air hangs thick with spores and pathogens, a miasma that would instantly kill any mortal foolish enough to draw breath within this diseased paradise. At the center of the garden stands Nurgle's mansion, a rotting structure of impossible proportions that somehow maintains its integrity despite advanced decay. The building's architecture constantly shifts as sections collapse and regenerate in new configurations, reflecting the cycle of destruction and renewal central to Nurgle's philosophy. Within these putrid halls, the plague god tends to his cauldron, an immense vessel containing every disease that has ever existed or will exist. Here, Nurgle experiments with new contagions, stirring his brew with grandfatherly affection while observing the effects of his creations on captured souls. Presiding over Nurgle's demonic hierarchy are the Great Unclean Ones, greater demons whose massive forms embody the plague god's generous nature. Standing 2 to 3 times the height of a space marine, these monstrous entities resemble bloated corpses swollen with gas and liquefied organs. Their saggy, greenish-yellow skin stretches over distended bellies that often split open to reveal writhing intestines and parasitic creatures nesting within. Despite their horrific appearance, Great Unclean Ones project an aura of perverse joviality, their gaping maws fixed in permanent grins as they spread Nurgle's gifts with paternal pride. Each Great Unclean One serves as a fragment of Nurgle himself, carrying a portion of the plague god's consciousness and authority. They bear names that mock their diseased nature: Botchalox the Bloated, Thrushax the Feculent, Morbidex Twiceborn, while wielding rusted blades called plague swords that corrupt everything they touch. The noxious ichor that seeps from their wounds contains hundreds of different pathogens, ensuring that even proximity to these greater demons proves fatal to unprotected mortals. Their bloated bodies prove surprisingly resilient, absorbing tremendous damage while regenerating injuries through accelerated disease processes. Among the Great Unclean Ones, certain individuals have achieved particular notoriety. Rotigus, known as the Rainfather, controls blighted precipitation that spreads contagion across vast areas. His manifestations bring endless downpours of filth that transform fertile lands into swampy breeding grounds for disease. Rotigus appears more aquatic than his brethren, his body constantly shedding a deluge of polluted liquid that taints groundwater and corrupts water purification systems. Imperial agricultural worlds particularly fear his appearance, as his reign can destroy generations of crop production within days, creating famine that weakens populations before the full effect of his diseases takes hold. Kugath occupies a unique position among Nurgle's greater demons. Known as the Plaguefather, this exceptional entity originated when Nurgle accidentally dropped a particularly favored plague into his cauldron. The disease took demonic form as Kugath, who now serves as Nurgle's foremost alchemist and plague brewer. Unlike other Great Unclean Ones who spread existing contagions, Kugath constantly develops new diseases, testing his creations on captured worlds and isolated populations. He carries a palanquin loaded with bubbling concoctions and experimental subjects, attended by Nurglings who serve as both assistants and test subjects for his latest formulations. The obsession driving Kagath stems from his desire to create the perfect disease, a plague so comprehensive it would impress even Nurgle himself. This ambition leads Kagath to methodical experimentation rather than random contamination, making his attacks particularly dangerous as they evolve in response to medical countermeasures. During the infestation of Gladius, Kagath released 7 distinct plague variants in sequence, each designed to overcome the resistance developed against its predecessor. By the time Imperial authorities recognized this pattern, the planet's population had been reduced to shambling plague zombies, serving as incubators for the Plaguefather's next creation. Below the great unclean ones in Nurgle's hierarchy stand the heralds, lesser demon princes who oversee specific aspects of disease spread. Poxbringers focus on direct infection through combat, leading plaguebearer hordes into battle while wielding bale swords that inflict festering wounds. Sloppity Bilepipers serve as twisted entertainers, capering through battlefields while playing discordant tunes on pipes fashioned from diseased bone. Their music induces unnatural vigor in Nurgle's forces, while causing nausea and disorientation in enemies. Spolpox Scriveners maintain tallies of diseases spread, using their obsessive record-keeping to drive plaguebearers to greater efforts through constant harassment. The most numerous of Nurgle's demons are the Plaguebearers, created from mortal souls who succumb to Nurgle's rot, a supernatural disease that affects both body and soul. Standing roughly human-sized, these demons possess a single eye, a horn protruding from their heads, and skin covered in suppurating sores that constantly leak pus and other bodily fluids. Their distended bellies and limbs display visible counting marks, reflecting the Plaguebearer's compulsion to enumerate Nurgle's diseases, an impossible task, as new contagions constantly emerge while old ones evolve into novel forms. Plaguebearers march into battle in ordered formations known as Talibans, their movements synchronized despite their decaying forms. Each Plaguebearer carries countless diseases, their very touch capable of inflicting multiple infections simultaneously. They wield plague swords, rusted blades coated in supernatural filth that corrupt both flesh and spirit with every cut. Despite their rotting appearance, Plaguebearers demonstrate surprising resilience, their bodies so saturated with disease that conventional damage merely creates new orifices through which contagion can spread. This durability makes them excellent frontline troops, absorbing enemy fire while inexorably advancing toward their targets. Serving as Nurgle's cavalry are the plague drones, massive demonic insects that resemble bloated flies, their bodies swollen with disease and decay. These creatures stand larger than horses, with transparent wings that buzz with supernatural vigor despite being riddled with holes and tears. Upon their backs ride privileged plaguebearers, directing these living vectors toward vulnerable targets. Plague drones attack by vomiting corrosive bile that dissolves armor and flesh, while the cloud of flies surrounding them carries dozens of different infections. The constant drone of their wings induces headaches and nausea in nearby enemies, weakening resistance before physical contact occurs. The most diminutive but numerous of Nurgle's servants are the Nurglings, tiny demons that resemble miniature great unclean ones. These mischievous entities emerge from the boils and pustules of larger demons, particularly from the stomach folds of great unclean ones, where they gestate like parasitic offspring. Nurglings attack in overwhelming swarms, their small size allowing them to infiltrate sealed environments through minute openings. They spread disease through bites and scratches, while their excretions contaminate food and water supplies. Despite their apparent weakness individually, Nurgling swarms can overwhelm much larger opponents through sheer numbers and the cumulative effect of their many infections. For siege warfare, Nurgle's legions deploy beasts of Nurgle, massive slug-like creatures that combine aspects of mollusk and hound in their physical form. These entities approach enemies with puppy-like enthusiasm, seeking to play with mortals by crushing them beneath their bulk or dissolving them with acidic slime. Their bodies consist primarily of semi-liquid flesh that flows around obstacles and through narrow openings, allowing them to bypass conventional defenses. The trail of mucus left by their passage contains dozens of different pathogens, transforming battlefields into disease-ridden quagmires that remain contaminated long after the beasts themselves have moved on. the cycle of decay and rebirth central to Nurgle's philosophy manifests most clearly in the relationship between his different demon types. When a plague-bearer accumulates sufficient experience and disease, it may develop into a herald, gaining authority and additional powers. Particularly successful heralds might eventually achieve the status of Great Unclean, one after thousands of years of faithful service. Conversely, when demons fail their master, they can be reduced to lesser forms. A disgraced herald might find itself demoted to a common plague-bearer, while a great unclean one that displeases Nurgle might be dissolved back into the primordial soup of the garden to reform as something new. This cyclical nature extends to Nurgle's approach to warfare. Unlike Khorne's straightforward aggression or Tzeentch's labyrinthine schemes, Nurgle's strategy embraces inevitable victory through attrition and contamination. His demons typically target infrastructure rather than military assets, poisoning water supplies, contaminating food stores, and introducing disease vectors into civilian populations. By the time conventional forces respond to a Nurglite incursion, the affected area has often already been compromised beyond salvation, with plague zombies and mutated survivors serving as anchors for further demonic manifestation. The Destroyer Plague represents one of Nurgle's most devastating creations, first unleashed during the Horus Heresy by the Death Guard traitor Legion. This engineered super disease combines conventional pathogens with warp-spawn contagions, creating an infection that affects both organic matter and machine systems. Victims experience rapid tissue necrosis alongside hallucinations and paranoia, eventually collapsing as their internal organs liquefy. The disease spreads through multiple vectors simultaneously: airborne spores, fluid contact, and even through Vox transmissions, where the sound patterns themselves carry psychic contamination that triggers initial symptoms. The zombie plague illustrates another aspect of Nurgle's cyclical philosophy. This particular contagion doesn't simply kill its victims, but transforms them into shambling vectors for further infection. The disease attacks the brain first, destroying higher functions while leaving basic motor control and aggression intact. As the infection progresses, the victim's body bloats with preservative chemicals naturally generated by the disease, preventing complete decomposition while maximizing contagiousness. The resulting plague zombies seek out uninfected individuals, spreading the disease through bites and bodily fluids. This self-perpetuating cycle allows the zombie plague to spread exponentially, particularly in densely populated areas like hive cities. The paradoxical joy found in Nurgle's corruption represents perhaps its most insidious aspect. As victims succumb to the plague god's diseases, they experience a strange euphoria. Their pain fades, replaced by acceptance and even gratitude for their condition. This psychological effect stems from Nurgle's warp influence, which rewires neural pathways to interpret suffering as pleasure and decay as renewal. Advanced victims often become willing propagators of disease, viewing their afflictions as gifts to be shared rather than curses to be cured. This phenomenon explains why Nurgle's cults prove particularly difficult to eradicate. Their members genuinely believe they're performing acts of compassion by spreading contagion. The concept of entropy forms the philosophical core of Nurgle's approach. Where other chaos gods rail against the inevitable heat death of the universe, Nurgle embraces this ultimate fate, finding beauty in the gradual breakdown of order into chaos. His demons embody this principle, their bodies in constant states of decomposition and regeneration. The joy they exhibit stems from acceptance of inevitable decay, a recognition that resistance proves futile, and only by embracing dissolution can one find peace. This philosophy proves particularly appealing to mortals facing terminal illness or living in squalid conditions, explaining why Nurgle's cults flourish in underhives, plague zones, and medical facilities. Nurgle's garden itself represents the ultimate expression of this entropic philosophy. Within its boundaries, the conventional separation between life and death breaks down completely. Rotting corpses sprout new growth, while living creatures host parasites that gradually consume them from within. Plants feed on decaying flesh, which in turn nourishes new organisms in an endless cycle. This process mirrors natural decomposition, but accelerated and exaggerated to supernatural degrees. The garden doesn't simply represent death, but transformation, the conversion of one form of existence into another without true ending, only change of state. The demonic hosts of Slaanesh manifest as the most visually captivating yet inherently disturbing of all the chaos powers. Unlike the straightforward brutality of Khorne or the festering decay of Nurgle, the Dark Prince's legions embody a terrible duality, simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, alluring and repulsive. This contradiction lies at the heart of Slaanesh's nature as the chaos god of excess, whose dominion encompasses all forms of sensation pushed beyond their natural limits into the realm of obsession. The Court of the Dark Prince operates through a complex hierarchical structure divided into 6 concentric rings, each representing a different aspect of excess. The outermost circle belongs to those devoted to excess of physical pleasure, the hedonists, sensualists, and those who pursue bodily perfection. Moving inward, the second circle houses those obsessed with material wealth and possession. The third circle contains the self-absorbed, those consumed by vanity and the need for adoration. The fourth circle belongs to excess of passion, artists, musicians, and those who seek perfect expression through creation. The fifth circle houses those devoted to physical and emotional cruelty, while the innermost circle, closest to Slaanesh himself, contains those rare individuals who have mastered all previous forms of excess and seek new sensations beyond mortal comprehension. Presiding over this twisted court are the Keepers of Secrets, greater demons who embody Slaanesh's contradictory nature in their physical forms. Standing 3 to 4 times the height of a human, these entities combine masculine and feminine characteristics in bodies that shift subtly as they move, never allowing observers to fully comprehend their appearance. Their skin ranges from alabaster white to deep purple, often with patterns that resemble intricate tattoos flowing across their surface. 4 arms extend from their torsos, typically 2 humanoid limbs ending in delicate hands capable of surgical precision, and 2 ending in massive crab-like claws that can shear through ceramite armor. Their heads feature elegant, almost beautiful facial features surrounding eyes that contain swirling hypnotic patterns. Keepers of Secrets move with impossible grace despite their massive size, each motion fluid and precisely calculated for maximum aesthetic impact. In battle, they dance rather than simply fight, their attacks blending into elaborate sequences that mesmerize opponents before delivering killing blows. Most wield soul-drinking weapons called Witstealer swords, blades that not only cut flesh but extract fragments of their victim's consciousness with each strike. These stolen soul fragments provide both nourishment and entertainment for the greater demons, who experience their victims' final moments as particularly exquisite sensations. Among the Keepers of Secrets, Ankari has achieved particular notoriety throughout Imperial history. One of the first greater demons of Slaanesh to manifest after the fall of the Eldari, Ankari specialized in hunting down and consuming the souls of that species, developing techniques specifically designed to counter their psychic defenses and physical agility. During the Horus Heresy, Ankari manifested on Prospero following the Space Wolves' attack, feasting on the psychic remnants of thousands of fallen Thousand Sons. In the 41st millennium, Ankari orchestrated a complex scheme targeting the bloodline of Primarch Robute Guilliman, systematically hunting down distant relatives of the Ultramarines Primarch to extract genetic material for unknown purposes. Ankari's physical form reflects its role as hunter and executioner. Unlike other Keepers of Secrets who maintain beautiful appearances, Ankari's features have grown increasingly predatory over millennia of existence. Its face combines elements of feline and serpentine anatomy, with elongated fangs and a jaw that can unhinge to swallow victims whole. The demon's limbs extend further than those of its kin, allowing it to move in impossible bounding leaps that cover vast distances in pursuit of prey. Ankari's most distinctive feature remains its voice, a multi-toned instrument capable of mimicking any sound, which it uses to lure victims by impersonating trusted allies or loved ones. Shalaxi Hellbane represents a more recent but equally dangerous addition to Slaanesh's elite servants. Created specifically as the Dark Prince's champion, Shalaxi serves as executioner of those who fall from Slaanesh's favor and hunter of champions dedicated to rival chaos gods. This specialized role gives Shalaxi unique authority among keepers of secrets, including the power to command other greater demons when pursuing designated targets. Shalaxi's physical form emphasizes duelist perfection, its body more streamlined than other keepers, optimized for one-on-one combat rather than mass slaughter. The demon wields a spear called Soulpiercer, a weapon that bypasses physical armor to strike directly at its target's essence. The most infamous of Shalaxis hunts targeted Skarbrand after the Bloodthirster's failed attack on Khorne. Pursuing the exiled demon across multiple dimensions, Shalaxi engaged Skarbrand in 9 separate duels, each time inflicting wounds before tactically withdrawing to prolong the Bloodthirster's suffering. This extended hunt exemplifies Slaanesh's approach to conflict, preferring to toy with enemies rather than simply destroying them, finding pleasure in the process rather than merely the outcome. Shalaxi eventually abandoned the pursuit only when Khorne himself intervened, demonstrating the complex politics between chaos powers that even their greatest servants must navigate. Below the keepers of secrets in Slaanesh's hierarchy stand the heralds, demon princes who serve as courtiers and lieutenants in the Dark Prince's service. These entities take various forms depending on their specific role, though all maintain the unsettling beauty characteristic of their patron. Infernal enrapturesses serve as musicians and torturers, playing instruments crafted from the nervous systems of their victims. Contorted epitomes function as living mirrors, reflecting distorted versions of reality that drive observers to madness. Vice leaders command military forces, while Heartpiercers serve as assassins targeting those who resist Slaanesh's temptations. The most common foot soldiers in Slaanesh's legions are the Daemonettes, lesser demons that combine allure and horror in equal measure. Standing slightly taller than humans, these entities appear initially as beautiful humanoid females, but closer inspection reveals disturbing abnormalities: crab-like claws replacing one or both arms, 2 wide mouths filled with needle-like teeth, or legs that bend in unnatural directions. Their skin tones range from pale pink to deep purple, often with iridescent patterns that shift as they move. Daemonettes attack with blinding speed, their movements too quick for mortal eyes to follow properly, appearing to teleport short distances as they dance through enemy formations. The psychological effect of Daemonettes proves as dangerous as their physical attacks. Their presence generates an aura of confusion and desire that affects all nearby mortals, regardless of personal preferences or orientation. This supernatural allure bypasses normal psychological defenses, creating a compulsion to move closer to the demons despite the obvious danger they represent. Imperial forces facing Daemonette incursions must often employ audio dampening and modified visors to filter out these effects, as even hardened veterans can fall victim to their influence without proper protection. Fiends of Slaanesh serve as the Dark Prince's hunting beasts, combining aspects of reptile, insect, and mammal in their disturbing anatomy. Their segmented bodies support multiple limbs ending in hooked claws, while their heads feature sensory organs unknown to Imperial biology. Most distinctive are the soporific musk glands located along their spines, which release psychoactive compounds that induce hallucinations and lethargy in nearby prey. Fiends hunt in packs, using their speed and sensory capabilities to track targets across impossible distances. Once prey is located, they employ pack tactics, some releasing concentrated musk to disorient victims while others move in for the kill. For heavy assault roles, Slaanesh's legions deploy keepers of secrets mounted on exalted chariots, massive war platforms pulled by steeds of Slaanesh, and adorned with sonic weapons that blast enemies with harmony-shattering frequencies. These vehicles move with impossible speed despite their size, leaving trails of psychedelic energy that temporarily thin the barrier between real space and the warp. The chariots serve both practical and ceremonial functions, allowing greater demons to survey battlefields while projecting an image of decadent authority that reinforces Slaanesh's aesthetic. The Seekers represent Slaanesh's cavalry units, consisting of Daemonettes mounted on steeds of Slaanesh, bipedal creatures resembling a fusion of horse, reptile, and insect. These mounts possess prehensile tongues capable of tasting emotions in the air, allowing them to track prey by following trails of fear or desire. In battle, Seekers perform elaborate flanking maneuvers, their speed allowing them to encircle enemy formations before they can properly respond. The synchronized movement of Seeker units creates hypnotic visual patterns that further disrupt enemy cohesion, making them particularly effective against disciplined forces whose strength lies in formation fighting. The special enmity between Slaanesh and the Eldari defines much of the Dark Prince's demonic activity. Since the fall, Slaanesh has maintained a perpetual hunger for Eldari souls, considering them its rightful property and most delicious sustenance. This obsession stems from the circumstances of Slaanesh's birth. Created through millennia of Eldari excess, the Dark Prince emerged with an instinctive understanding of Eldari psychology and an insatiable desire to complete the consumption begun during the fall. Slaanesh's demons can sense Eldari presence across vast distances, automatically prioritizing them over other targets when they appear on battlefields. This special connection manifests most clearly in the existence of specialized hunter demons, created specifically to track and capture Eldari souls. The Heartslayers serve as Slaanesh's elite Eldari hunters, their forms incorporating aspects of ancient Eldari mythology perverted into nightmarish configurations. These specialized demons possess the unique ability to track Eldari through the webway itself, following psychic traces left by their passage. The Heartslayers' weapons incorporate soul-trapping technologies reverse-engineered from Eldari designs, allowing them to capture victims' consciousness rather than simply destroying them, delivering these captured souls to Slaanesh for extended torment. The Eldari, for their part, have developed extensive countermeasures against Slaanesh's predations. Craftworld Eldari follow the Path System, a lifestyle of rigid discipline designed to prevent emotional excess that might attract the Dark Prince's attention. They wear spirit stones to capture their souls at death, preventing Slaanesh from claiming them. The Drukhari of Komorog employ more pragmatic protection, sacrificing other souls to Slaanesh as substitutes for their own. The Harlequins rely on the protection of Segorach, the Laughing God, whose trickery can sometimes pluck Eldari souls from Slaanesh's grasp. Despite these precautions, every Eldari knows that eternal torment in Slaanesh's realm remains their likely fate should their protections fail. The methods of corruption employed by Slaaneshi demons differ significantly from those of other chaos entities. Where Khorne's servants appeal to rage and Nurgle's to despair, Slaanesh's minions target desire in all its forms. The process typically begins subtly. A demon might appear in dreams, offering fulfillment of minor ambitions or relief from small frustrations. As the target grows accustomed to these interventions, the demon gradually escalates its offerings, introducing progressively more extreme experiences while ensuring each new sensation exceeds the last in intensity. This creates a spiral of escalating need, as normal stimuli no longer provide satisfaction compared to the supernatural experiences the demon provides. In imperial society, Slaaneshi corruption often begins in high society, where wealth and security create fertile ground for ennui and the search for novel experiences. Planetary governors, noble houses, and wealthy merchant families frequently fall victim to such influence, initially believing they're simply patronizing exotic entertainment rather than engaging with the supernatural. The corruption spreads downward through society as elites demand increasingly extreme experiences, creating markets for forbidden substances and services that gradually expose broader populations to Slaaneshi influence. By the time obvious signs of demonic activity emerge, mutation, public depravity, or reality distortions, the corruption has typically progressed too far for simple containment. The Noise Marines of the Emperor's Children Trader Legion represent the most visible example of Slaaneshi corruption within the Adeptus Astartes. These fallen Space Marines have modified their enhanced physiology to experience sound with impossible intensity, while simultaneously weaponizing sonic energy against their enemies. Their armor incorporates amplification systems and sonic projectors that translate their distorted perceptions into devastating sonic attacks. In battle, Noise Marines experience combat as an art form, orchestrating symphonies of destruction where enemy screams provide counterpoint to the shriek of their sonic weapons. Their enhanced senses have become both blessing and curse, providing supernatural awareness of their surroundings while constantly driving them to seek more extreme stimuli. Slaanesh's corruption manifests physically through distinctive mutations that reflect the Dark Prince's aesthetic. Initial changes often appear beneficial, enhanced sensory perception, physical beauty, or improved dexterity. As corruption progresses, these improvements extend beyond natural limits, eyes multiplying across the body to provide 360-degree vision, skin becoming hypersensitive to the point where even air contact causes overwhelming sensation, or limbs elongating into elegant but inhuman proportions. Advanced corruption produces more dramatic transformations, additional limbs, crab-like claws, or sensory organs that can perceive emotions as colors or taste thoughts directly. The final stages often incorporate aspects of demonette anatomy, as the barrier between mortal and demon thins. The psychological effects of Slaaneshi corruption prove equally distinctive. Victims develop obsessive behavior patterns, fixating on specific sensations or experiences to the exclusion of all else. This fixation gradually consumes their personality, eroding previous loyalties and ethical boundaries in service to their new obsession. A once loyal imperial official might begin collecting forbidden artwork, then progress to commissioning increasingly disturbing pieces, eventually sacrificing subordinates to create living sculptures that blur the line between art and atrocity. Throughout this progression, the victim typically maintains the conviction that they remain in control, viewing their actions as sophisticated exploration rather than corruption. The transformation from mortal to demon prince represents the ultimate reward for those who dedicate themselves to the ruinous powers. Unlike the demons born directly from the emotional energies of the warp, demon princes begin their existence as mortal beings who, through exceptional service to their patron god, are granted the ultimate boon: ascension beyond the limitations of physical form into a state of immortal demonic existence. This process represents a fundamental transformation of essence rather than mere mutation, as the mortal's soul is reforged with pure warp energy while retaining the experiences and personality of their previous existence. The path to demonic ascension typically begins with small corruptions, minor mutations, enhanced abilities, or supernatural insights granted as rewards for service. As the champion accumulates favor, these gifts increase in significance, gradually reshaping their physical form and mental processes to better reflect their patron's nature. A cornate champion might develop hardened skin resembling brass armor, while a Nurgle devotee's body becomes resistant to damage through supernatural resilience. These changes serve both as rewards and tests, as each transformation distances the champion from their original humanity while binding them more tightly to their god's service. The final transformation occurs when a champion performs a deed of such significance that it draws their patron's direct attention. The nature of this achievement varies according to the god in question. Khorne might elevate a warrior who slaughters an entire chapter of Space Marines, while Tzeentch could reward a sorcerer who unravels a particularly complex strand of fate. When this threshold is crossed, the champion's physical form dissolves entirely, their essence drawn into the warp where their patron god personally reshapes them according to their new role. The resulting entity emerges as something neither fully demon nor fully mortal, but a unique hybrid possessing aspects of both. The physical form of a newly ascended demon prince reflects both their patron's nature and their own history. Those dedicated to specific gods manifest characteristics associated with their patron. Cornate princes develop muscular bodies with brass-like skin, while Nurglite princes become bloated with disease yet impossibly resilient. Undivided demon princes, those who served chaos as a whole rather than a specific god, retain greater resemblance to their original forms while still undergoing significant transformation. In all cases, the new form incorporates symbolic elements reflecting the champion's personal journey to ascension. Weapons that proved significant in their mortal life might become fused with their anatomy, or particularly meaningful victories might be represented through trophies incorporated into their flesh. The psychological transformation accompanying physical ascension proves equally profound. Demon princes retain their memories and core personality, but their perspective shifts dramatically as they become untethered from mortal concerns like survival and aging. Time perception changes as they partially exist within the warp, where past, present, and potential futures can be experienced simultaneously. Their emotional responses intensify while simultaneously becoming more alien. Rage burns hotter, satisfaction cuts deeper, and ambition extends beyond mortal comprehension. Despite these changes, the individual experiences of their mortal existence continue to shape their goals and methods, creating entities far more complex and unpredictable than naturally occurring demons. This retention of individuality represents the primary distinction between demon princes and natural demons, where entities like bloodletters or demonettes emerge from the warp as manifestations of specific emotional concepts, with limited variation between individuals. Each demon prince represents a unique combination of mortal experience and demonic power. This individuality makes them particularly dangerous opponents, as they combine the supernatural abilities of demons with the strategic thinking and adaptability developed during their mortal existence. A bloodletter will always attack with straightforward rage, but a cornate demon prince might employ sophisticated tactics learned during centuries of warfare before their ascension. The Primarchs of the Traitor Legions represent the most powerful and notorious demon princes in Imperial history. Created by the Emperor as superhuman generals to lead his great crusade, these beings already possessed genetic modifications and psychic potential far beyond normal humanity before their corruption. Their subsequent ascension to demonic status elevated them to near godlike power levels, creating entities that combine the strategic genius and leadership abilities of their original design with the reality-warping powers of greater demons. Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard Legion, exemplifies the transformation wrought by Nurgle's patronage. Once a stern warrior dedicated to resilience and self-reliance, Mortarion's journey to demonhood came unwillingly during the early days of the Horus Heresy. When his legion became trapped in the warp during transit, a mysterious plague swept through their ships, inflicting agonies even their enhanced physiology couldn't withstand. Desperate to save his sons, Mortarion ultimately surrendered to Nurgle's influence, accepting the plague god's gifts in exchange for his legion's survival. The transformation remade both Primarch and Legion, their bodies becoming bloated vessels for supernatural diseases, while their minds developed the peculiar joy in suffering characteristic of Nurgle's followers. In his current form, Mortarion stands as a towering figure shrouded in toxic miasma, his once handsome features stretched across an elongated, corpse-like face partially obscured by breathing apparatus. His body has grown to massive proportions, with necrotic flesh visible through rents in his ancient power armor. Tattered wings reminiscent of those belonging to Terran carrion insects sprout from his back, allowing him to float above battlefields while directing his plague-ridden forces. He wields Silence, a massive scythe whose rusted blade delivers supernatural diseases with each strike, alongside the hand cannon lantern, which fires bullets containing concentrated plague spores capable of infecting entire population centers. Mortarion's demonic ascension granted him control over disease processes that would be impossible through conventional biology. He can manipulate pathogens at will, accelerating mutations, or creating entirely new strains with specific effects. The atmosphere around him becomes supernaturally toxic, with different layers of miasma causing distinct afflictions. The outermost fog might cause blindness and disorientation, while the air closest to his body dissolves ceramite armor and the flesh beneath it. Despite these horrific powers, Mortarion retains the tactical acumen and leadership abilities that made him an effective Primarch, directing his Death Guard with the same methodical precision he employed during the Great Crusade, albeit toward far darker purposes. Magnus the Red followed a different path to demonhood, his transformation rooted in his identity as a psyker rather than a warrior. Created with an innate connection to the warp stronger than any other Primarch, Magnus had explored the Immaterium extensively before the Emperor's prohibitions at the Council of Nicaea. When he attempted to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal through psychic means, Magnus inadvertently breached the protections around the Imperial Palace, causing catastrophic damage to the Emperor's secret webway project. The subsequent dispatch of the space wolves to punish the Thousand Sons pushed Magnus to accept Tzeentch's offer of salvation, transforming himself and his legion to escape destruction. The demon Primarch Magnus now stands as a towering crimson giant with features that shift subtly between humanoid and avian. His single eye, the source of his epithet, the Cyclops, glows with inner fire that can pierce physical and metaphysical barriers alike. Golden armor adorned with Tzeentchian symbols covers portions of his body, while other areas remain exposed crimson flesh etched with glowing runes of power. Great feathered wings extend from his back, though Magnus rarely uses physical flight, preferring to levitate through psychic means. His physical form can change size dramatically according to his needs, sometimes appearing merely twice human height, other times towering over battle tanks. Magnus's psychic abilities, already formidable before his transformation, expanded exponentially with his ascension. He can perceive events across vast distances, project his consciousness into multiple locations simultaneously, and manipulate reality through sheer force of will. His mastery of biomancy allows him to reshape his own form or those of others, while his control over the warp itself enables him to redirect energy flows or tear open rifts between dimensions. These abilities make Magnus among the most dangerous of the demon Primarchs, as his actions can affect reality on a strategic scale rather than merely tactical. During the siege of the Fenris system, Magnus's psychic power proved sufficient to drag an entire planet partially into the warp, demonstrating the scope of his capabilities when fully manifested. Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters, represents perhaps the most straightforward path to demonhood through Khorne's patronage. Unlike Magnus and Mortarion, whose transformations involved complex circumstances and reluctant choices, Angron's elevation came as direct reward for his unrelenting bloodshed. Created by the Emperor as a living weapon, Angron had been further modified by the Butcher's Nails, archaeotech implants that stimulated his brain's aggression centers while suppressing all other emotions. These devices, combined with the trauma of his early life as a gladiator slave, created a being of pure rage even before chaos corruption began. During the Battle of Scalathrax, as his World Eaters fought against the Emperor's children, Angron's dedication to slaughter reached such intensity that Khorne directly intervened, elevating him to demonhood as reward for his bloodshed. The transformation amplified Angron's already considerable physical abilities, while removing the last vestiges of restraint from his personality. His new form stood taller than a dreadnought, with crimson skin hardened like ceramite and musculature that rippled with barely contained fury. Brass armor fused directly with his flesh at critical junctures, while his head elongated into a bestial shape reminiscent of ancient Terran hunting dogs. Most distinctive were the wings that sprouted from his back, not feathered like those of other demon Primarchs, but formed from crystallized blood that shattered and reformed with each movement. Angron's combat capabilities as a demon Primarch exceed even the formidable prowess he displayed as a mortal. His strength allows him to tear apart battle tanks with his bare hands, while his speed enables him to intercept bullets mid-flight. The twin axes he wields, Gorefather and Gorechild, became extensions of his demonic essence, capable of cutting through reality itself to strike at his enemies' souls as well as their bodies. His presence on battlefields generates a psychic effect known as the Blood Haze, which intensifies aggression in nearby combatants regardless of allegiance, often causing Imperial forces to turn on each other in frenzies of uncontrolled violence. During the First War for Armageddon, Angron led a force of World Eaters and Khornate demons that slaughtered billions before a full company of Grey Knights managed to banish him back to the warp. The process of demonic ascension carries significant risks alongside its rewards. Many champions fail during the final transformation, their bodies and souls unable to contain the warp energies required for the process. These failures result in the champion's essence dissolving completely, or worse, transforming into a chaos spawn, a mindless, constantly mutating mass of flesh with no resemblance to their former self. Even successful ascensions include an element of enslavement, as the new demon prince becomes fundamentally tied to their patron's will. While they retain greater independence than lesser demons, demon princes cannot directly oppose their god's commands and must operate within the boundaries of their new existence. For mortal followers of chaos who have not yet achieved demonic status, the path to power follows a progression of increasing corruption and reward. Chaos champions represent those mortals who have drawn their patrons' direct attention through exceptional service. These individuals receive tangible marks of favor, mutations that enhance their capabilities, demon weapons that channel warp energy, or supernatural insights that grant strategic advantages. Champions often lead warbands or cults, serving as the primary interface between demonic patrons and larger mortal organizations. Their enhanced abilities and direct connection to their gods make them formidable opponents, capable of challenging Space Marine captains or other elite Imperial leaders in single combat. The relationship between mortal champions and their demonic patrons resembles a complex transaction rather than simple worship. The champion provides service in the form of bloodshed, scheming, spreading disease, or fostering excess, depending on their patron's nature. In exchange, the Chaos God grants incremental rewards that enhance the champion's effectiveness while binding them more tightly to their service. This arrangement creates a cycle of escalating commitment, as each new gift requires greater service to maintain favor, while simultaneously making the champion more dependent on their patron's power to survive. The ultimate goal for most champions is ascension to demonhood, though few fully comprehend what this transformation truly entails until they experience it. The Emperor of Mankind represents the ultimate contradiction in the eyes of demonkind, a being of immense psychic power who stands diametrically opposed to their very existence. To the denizens of the warp, he is known by a singular title, the Anathema. This name is whispered with a mixture of hatred and fear among the demonic legions, for the Emperor's presence in both the material realm and the immaterium represents their most fundamental nemesis, a force capable of not merely banishing, but utterly destroying their immortal essence. The Emperor's nature as the Anathema stems from his unique metaphysical composition. Unlike other powerful psychers who channel the warp's energies, the Emperor appears to generate a distinctive form of psychic power that inherently repels and negates chaos energies. Inquisitorial scholars theorize that this power represents the concentrated psychic potential of ordered consciousness, the antithesis to the emotional turbulence that gives birth to demons. When directed against warp entities, this energy doesn't simply disrupt their physical forms, but attacks the fundamental patterns that constitute their existence. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor's mere presence proved sufficient to banish lesser demons, while even greater demons could not maintain manifestation in his immediate vicinity. Accounts from this period describe how demonic entities would flee rather than face the master of mankind directly, recognizing an existential threat beyond mere banishment. The few recorded instances where powerful demons attempted to confront the Emperor directly ended with their complete destruction, not merely a return to the warp, but the dissolution of their essential pattern, a true death for beings that otherwise exist eternally. This anathemic effect extended beyond the Emperor's physical presence through objects and individuals touched by his power. The Custodian Guard, created using techniques personally overseen by the Emperor, carry a fraction of his essence within their transhuman bodies. This connection makes them particularly resistant to demonic influence and effective at combating warp entities. Similarly, weapons crafted or blessed by the Emperor's hand, such as the legendary swords wielded by Primarchs during the Great Crusade, demonstrated enhanced effectiveness against demonic foes, cutting through their supernatural defenses with unmatched efficiency. Following the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne after his confrontation with Horus, his anathemic nature has not diminished, but rather changed in manifestation. The Astronomicon, powered by the Emperor's consciousness and the sacrifice of thousands of psychers daily, projects not only a navigational beacon, but a constant psychic pressure that restricts demonic activity throughout much of the galaxy. Regions beyond the Astronomicon's reach, such as the Imperium Nihilus created by the formation of the Cicatrix Maledictum, experience significantly higher rates of demonic incursion, demonstrating the protective effect his presence continues to exert. The Emperor's power manifests most directly through the living saints, individuals who, through extraordinary faith and circumstance, become vessels for fragments of the Emperor's power. These beings radiate the same anathemic energy that characterized the Emperor during the Great Crusade, their presence causing physical pain to demons and disrupting warp-based powers in their vicinity. Saint Celestine, perhaps the most active of these vessels in the current era, has demonstrated the ability to permanently destroy demon princes with her flaming sword, suggesting that she channels a portion of the Emperor's fundamental nature rather than merely borrowing psychic power. Faith in the Emperor has itself become a weapon against demonic entities. While Imperial scholars debate whether this effect stems from psychic resonance with the Emperor's actual consciousness or represents a form of collective psychic phenomenon generated by trillions of believing humans, the practical impact remains undeniable. Individuals with unwavering faith can resist demonic possession more effectively than those without such conviction, while prayers and devotional acts can disrupt minor demonic manifestations. The Sisters of Battle have weaponized this phenomenon through their acts of faith, channeling belief into tangible effects that burn demons as surely as Prometheum burns flesh. The Grey Knight's Space Marine chapter represents the Emperor's most specialized weapon against demonic incursion. Created using gene seed reportedly derived directly from the Emperor's own genetic material, these warriors combine transhuman physical capabilities with powerful psychic abilities specifically tuned to combat warp entities. Each Grey Knight undergoes training that includes exposure to controlled demonic presence, building psychological resistance while teaching them to identify and exploit weaknesses specific to different types of warp entities. Their weapons incorporate materials and consecration rituals designed to maximize effectiveness against demons, from Nemesis force weapons that channel psychic energy directly into demonic essence to specialized ammunition that disrupts the patterns holding materialized demons together. The most closely guarded secret of the Grey Knights lies in the true names they have collected over their long history of demon hunting. Stored in the Sanctum Sanctorum on Titan, these names represent the complete psychic patterns of individual demons, providing absolute control over the entities when properly invoked. A Grey Knight who knows a demon's true name can prevent its manifestation entirely, force it to materialize at a specific location, or even compel it to act against its nature. The most powerful true names, those belonging to greater demons and demon primarchs, are known only to the highest-ranking members of the chapter, as their use carries significant risk of psychic backlash. Beyond the Emperor's direct influence, the Imperium has developed various technologies and techniques to combat demonic threats. Null rods, devices constructed from materials that naturally disrupt warp energy, create localized fields where demonic entities struggle to maintain cohesion. These weapons prove particularly effective in the hands of Sisters of Silence and other Null Maidens, whose natural pariah gene amplifies the disruptive effect. When a Null Maiden wielding a Null Rod confronts a demon, the combined negative psychic pressure can force even powerful entities back into the warp through sheer metaphysical contradiction. Sick-out grenades represent another specialized anti-demon weapon in the Imperial arsenal. These devices contain crystallized psychic energy harvested from deceased psychers, particularly those sacrificed to sustain the Golden Throne. When detonated, these grenades release a burst of energy that mimics the Emperor's anathemic presence on a small scale, causing demons to experience something akin to physical pain while disrupting the patterns maintaining their manifestation. The Ordo Malleus deploys these weapons selectively, as their production requires resources that cannot be easily replaced and their effectiveness diminishes against demons of greater power. Sanctified weapons, conventional arms that have undergone blessing rituals, occupy a middle ground between standard military equipment and specialized demon hunting tools. The effectiveness of these weapons stems from a combination of psychological impact and actual metaphysical alteration. When a demon recognizes symbols of faith that millions of humans invest with meaning, this collective psychic weight creates a genuine disruption in the entity's ability to maintain coherence. The physical materials may also be treated with substances that resonate poorly with warp energy, such as oils mixed with crushed sick-out crystals or metals forged in flames fed by sanctified promethium. The most essential technology for protecting humanity from demonic incursion remains the Gellar Field, the device that allows Imperial ships to traverse the warp without being overrun by its denizens. These fields project a bubble of real space around a vessel, maintaining the natural laws that make demonic manifestation difficult while preventing direct contact between the ship and the raw immaterium. The technology dates to humanity's dark age of technology, with the fundamental principles now poorly understood even by the Adeptus Mechanicus. Modern Gellar fields rely on the induced dreams of a specially prepared psyker kept in a comatose state. Their dreaming mind generates a pattern of reality that the field projectors amplify to create the protective bubble. When a Gellar field fails during warp transit, the results prove invariably catastrophic. Demons pour into the unprotected vessel, initially manifesting as misty apparitions or distortions in the air before solidifying into their characteristic forms. The crew experiences a range of psychic phenomena before direct attack, impossible sounds emanating from solid bulkheads, reflections that move independently of their owners, or gravity fluctuations that send objects floating upward. These effects typically last only moments before full manifestation occurs, at which point survival becomes nearly impossible. Ships recovered after Gellar field failure typically contain no survivors, only corpses displaying impossible wounds or evidence of possession. The Ordo Malleus has established specific protocols for responding to different categories of demonic incursion. Minor manifestations, those involving only a handful of lesser demons, can often be handled by specialized inquisitorial teams equipped with sanctified weapons and sick-out grenades, supported by Sisters of Battle or other faith-based Imperial forces. Moderate incursions requiring Grey Knight intervention typically involve either multiple greater demons or large numbers of lesser entities accompanied by possessed humans. Full-scale demonic invasions, particularly those led by demon primarchs or involving permanent warp rifts, may necessitate exterminatus if the Grey Knights determine the world cannot be reclaimed. The black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica represent another critical component of humanity's defense against demonic threats. By gathering untrained psychers before they can serve as unwitting gateways for warp entities, these vessels prevent countless potential incursions before they begin. The ships themselves incorporate multiple redundant Gellar fields and other protective measures, as their psychically active cargo makes them particularly attractive targets for demonic attention. Null maidens from the Sisters of Silence typically crew these vessels, their pariah gene creating an additional layer of protection against both demonic attack and potential psychic accidents among the collected psychers. Blanks, humans born with the pariah gene that renders them psychically negative, represent one of the Imperium's rarest and most valuable resources in combating demonic threats. Unlike normal humans who register neutrally in the warp, or psychers who create bright beacons of psychic energy, blanks generate a shadow that actively repels and disrupts warp phenomena. The strongest blanks can prevent demonic manifestation entirely within their immediate vicinity, while even minor pariahs make possession virtually impossible. The Culexus Temple of the Officio Assassinorum specifically recruits individuals with this genetic trait, training them to weaponize their natural ability against psychic and demonic targets. The psychological impact of blanks on demons appears similar to the effect the Emperor himself generates, though on a significantly reduced scale. Demons describe experiencing physical pain in a blank's presence, along with a sensation of their essence being drawn away or dispersed. This effect extends beyond mere discomfort for lesser demons, potentially forcing them back into the warp if the blank's null field proves sufficiently powerful. Even greater demons must expend additional energy to maintain manifestation near a strong blank, creating a vulnerability that experienced demon hunters can exploit by deploying pariahs strategically to weaken powerful entities before engaging them directly. The Imperium's understanding of demonic vulnerabilities has expanded significantly since the Horus Heresy, largely through the dedicated research of the Ordo Malleus. This knowledge remains tightly restricted, with different levels of information available to operatives based on their rank and need. Basic principles, such as the effectiveness of faith-based attacks and the vulnerability of demons to weapons bearing the Emperor's symbols, are taught to all inquisitorial agents who might encounter warp entities. More specialized knowledge, including the specific weaknesses of different demonic types and techniques for disrupting particular manifestation patterns, remains reserved for dedicated demon hunters who have proven their psychological resilience. The First War for Armageddon stands as one of the most devastating demonic incursions in Imperial history, a conflict that would forever change how the Imperium viewed the threat of chaos. In the late 41st millennium, the hive world of Armageddon found itself the target of a massive invasion led by the demon Primarch Angron and his World Eaters Legion. The initial assault began without warning when a massive space hulk, the Devourer of Stars, translated from the Warp-In system, disgorging thousands of World Eaters Chaos space marines and cultists onto the planet's surface. What Imperial defenders initially believed to be merely another Chaos raid quickly revealed itself as something far more terrible. As the fighting intensified around Hive and Furnace, reality itself began to fray. The skies above the battlefield split open with crimson tears as Khornate demons poured through in unprecedented numbers. Bloodlitters formed the vanguard of this demonic host, their synchronized advance cutting through PDF defenses with methodical precision. Behind them came packs of flesh hounds that tracked down and eliminated Imperial psychers with unerring accuracy, while juggernauts carrying blood crushers smashed through armored positions that had withstood conventional attacks. The appearance of Angron himself marked the incursion's transformation from major attack to planetary catastrophe. The demon Primarch materialized at the head of 12 bloodthirsters, the infamous Crewer Praetoria, an honor guard of greater demons hand-picked from Khorne's most elite warriors. Standing twice the height of a dreadnought, Angron's demonic form radiated palpable waves of rage that drove even disciplined Imperial troops into murderous frenzies. His twin axes, Gorchald and Gorefather, cut through tank armor and void shields with equal ease, while his presence anchored the demonic incursion, preventing the warp entities from being drawn back to the Immaterium. The Grey Knight's response to the Armageddon crisis demonstrated the Imperium's specialized protocols for handling demonic Primarch manifestations. The entirety of the Third Brotherhood deployed under the command of Brother Captain Aurelian, their strike cruisers translating directly into low orbit above the primary manifestation zone. Rather than engaging the entire demonic host, the Grey Knights executed a precisely targeted deep strike, teleporting directly into the path of Angron and his Bloodthirster guard. This strategy recognized that eliminating the primary anchor, the demon Primarch himself, would weaken the overall incursion enough for conventional forces to contain. The battle between the Grey Knights and Angron's forces became the stuff of restricted Imperial legend. Brother Captain Aurelian and his paladins engaged the Bloodthirsters, while the bulk of the Brotherhood fought to reach Angron himself. The Demon Primarch's physical abilities exceeded even the enhanced capabilities of the Grey Knights, his every swing claiming multiple warriors despite their warded armor and force weapons. The tide turned only when the surviving Grey Knights formed a telekinetic convergence, channeling their combined psychic power through Brother Captain Aurelian. This concentrated burst of the Emperor's anathemic energy proved sufficient to banish Angron back to the warp, though the effort cost the lives of over 100 Grey Knights, including Aurelian himself. The aftermath of the First War for Armageddon illustrated the Inquisition's ruthless approach to demonic contamination. Despite the successful defense of the planet, Lord Inquisitor Gesme Cisneros determined that the civilian population represented an unacceptable security risk after exposure to demonic forces. The subsequent purge and internment of Armageddon's population led to direct conflict with the Space Wolves chapter, who objected to the execution of civilians they had fought to protect. This months of shame highlighted the tension between pragmatic containment of chaos knowledge and the human cost of such policies. The Siege of Vrax presented a different pattern of demonic incursion, one that evolved gradually from human corruption rather than arriving as a coordinated invasion. What began in the year 813 of the 41st millennium as an imperial operation to remove a potentially heretical cardinal from power devolved over 2 decades into one of the most contaminated demonic battlegrounds in recent imperial history. The initial uprising of the Vrax garrison might have been contained quickly had Chaos Space Marines from the Alpha Legion not intervened, transforming a rebellion into a stronghold for Chaos forces of all kinds. As the death toll on Vrax mounted through years of attritional warfare, the psychic echoes of suffering and death created conditions increasingly favorable for demonic manifestation. By the siege's 15th year, spontaneous possessions began occurring among both rebel and imperial forces. Astropaths reported disturbing changes in the warp around Vrax, describing it as thinning or becoming permeable. These warnings prompted the Ordo Malleus to take direct control of the campaign, deploying inquisitorial forces specialized in combating demonic threats. The first major demonic manifestation on Vrax occurred in the sector designated Defense Line Xylophone. Imperial Guard forces reported encountering humanoid entities carrying Baroque brass instruments that emitted sound patterns, causing instant insanity. These heralds of Slaanesh created breaches in the Imperial lines that allowed conventional Chaos forces to overrun 3 fortress positions before inquisitorial units equipped with sonic dampening gear could respond. Analysis of picked captures from this engagement confirmed the presence of demonettes and at least one Keeper of Secrets operating alongside mortal Chaos forces. As the conflict intensified,